I always thought being the older sister meant something. Not in a dramatic, I'll fight your battles kind of way, but in the quiet, steady way. The one who picks you up at the airport at 3 a.m., who holds your hair when you're sick from heartbreak, who foots half your rent when you're too proud to ask for help. That kind of sister. Emily was 4 years younger, and for most of our lives she looked up to me in the way little sisters do. She copied my handwriting in middle school. She borrowed my sweaters in high school. She cried in my arms the night her first boyfriend cheated on her during her sophomore year at USC. I flew down from Seattle to Los Angeles just to hold her while she sobbed on a bathroom floor littered with mascara-stained tissues. She said she couldn't breathe without me. I didn't need to be the maid of honor. I didn't need a front row seat, but I never thought I'd be erased entirely. No call, no warning. Just a message. The guest list is finalized. We had to make some tough cuts. Hope you understand. I used to fly home at 3 a.m. to hold her after breakups, worked overtime to cover her rent, stayed up through her meltdowns over men who didn't love her right. And now the one who didn't make the cut was me. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I packed a bag, booked 2 tickets to Bora business class, and let silence say everything I was too exhausted to explain. She stood beneath crystal chandeliers in the gown she bought with the 12 grand she said was for grad school. Smiling for cameras, controlling every angle, every caption, every name on the seating chart. Especially the ones she left blank. But just as she posed, karma started clicking. The man beside her wasn't blind. He knew about the forged paperwork, the stolen accounts. And when the cuff snapped onto her wrists, everyone thought it was a prank until they saw the badge. And the laughter turned to stillness. I was on a balcony with the man who chose me long before my sister crossed me out. And for the first time, I wondered if I had never really been left out. Maybe I had just stepped into freedom. And I believed her. When our dad had his stroke in 2014, I moved back into the house for 6 months while Emily finished grad school. I ran the errands. I scheduled his therapy. I held our mom together while she cried into dish towels at midnight. Emily showed up for holidays and smiled in the photos. Everyone called her the sunshine of the family. When Emily lost her job in 2019, I wrote her a check to cover 3 months' rent without hesitation. She cried again, hugged me, said she'd pay me back. She never did. I never asked. We weren't perfect. But we were sisters. At least I thought we were. Things began to shift when Emily started dating Brent Callahan, CEO of a flashy tech startup based in Manhattan Beach. Private school, polished teeth, too white to be real. He was charming in that slick, empty way that made you want to wash your hands after shaking his. I kept my distance. Emily was smitten. The engagement came fast. A rooftop dinner. A drone carrying the ring. A sunset time to the proposal. It was ridiculous and staged, and the video went viral within hours. The wedding planning began immediately. Napa Valley. A private estate with lavender fields and string lights. The kind of wedding that costs 6 figures and requires a mood board and a stylist just for the guests. I didn't say much. I offered help. It was politely declined. I figured Emily wanted to plan her wedding her way. That was fine. I still believed I'd be there. I was her sister. Then came the text. It was a Wednesday evening. I was sitting on the couch with Ryan, my fiancé, watching reruns of old Top Chef episodes, eating takeout Chinese. My phone buzzed. I wiped my fingers on a napkin, glanced down, and saw Emily's name. Hey, just wanted to let you know the guest list is finalized. We had to make some tough cuts. Hope you understand. Love you. I read it again. Then a third time. I turned to Ryan. She didn't just say what I think she said, right? Ryan raised an eyebrow. Read it out loud. I did. And when I finished, the silence sat between us like a block of concrete. I called Mom. She picked up on the second ring, chipper as always. Hey, sweetie, what's going on? I didn't bother with pleasantries. I just got a text from Emily. She says the guest list is finalized and I'm not on it. A pause. Just long enough to tell me everything. Oh, honey, Mom sighed, using the voice she reserved for what she deemed overreactions. It's not personal. Emily just needed to keep the numbers tight. You know how expensive weddings are. Mom. She invited 180 people. I saw the RSVP page online. It's literally public. Well, you know. Some things are complicated. Maybe she thought you'd understand. Understand what? That I'm not welcome at my own sister's wedding. Madeline, it's just one day. Don't make this bigger than it is. That's when it hit me. They'd already decided. Long before this text. Long before I even realized something was off. Somewhere along the way I became optional. Expendable. I hung up. No goodbye. Ryan sat quietly next to me. He didn't ask if I was okay. He knew I wasn't. He waited. I scrolled back through the message, then locked my phone. I'm not sure what stung more. That Emily excluded me. Or that my mother expected me to accept it like a grown-up, swallow the slight and smile anyway. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water I didn't drink. Then I turned back to Ryan and said quietly, "They just made a choice." He tilted his head. And not me. And for the first time in a long time, I let the silence speak for me. Ryan stood behind me in the kitchen, quiet, just present the way he always was when I needed someone to hold the weight I refused to show. He didn't say anything right away. Just reached for a glass and poured his own water. I could feel the question sitting on his lips, but he gave me space to fill it in my own time. I looked down at the counter and said, "Do you remember when Emily asked me for that 12 grand back in 2022? Ryan nodded slowly. "The MBA tuition. I gave it to her without a second thought. She said she needed it to lock in her final semester at Stanford, that she was afraid of falling behind. And I believed her. I remember transferring the money that same day, telling her not to worry about paying it back." Ryan leaned against the island, arms folded. But I pulled out my phone, opened the venue website Emily had been tagging in every Instagram update for the past 3 months. That same vineyard in St. Helena. Private exclusive, fully booked until next year. I clicked through the pricing brochure, which of course had no shame in publishing their costs. Deposit $12,000. Non-refundable. I held up the screen. Same amount. Same date. Same year. Ryan didn't look surprised. Not anymore. So the wedding I'm not invited to is being held at a place I unknowingly helped pay for. I felt the sentence lodge in my throat like a piece of glass. There was no rage. Just a slow, cold awareness. I wasn't just forgotten. I was used. And now I was discarded. I stared out the window where the neighbors' kids were playing basketball in the fading light. It was spring in Seattle, soft wind and golden skies, but all I felt was the hollowing. "You know what gets me?" I said, voice low. I didn't even blink when she asked. I just wired it like always. Because I thought that's what sisters do. "You did what someone kind would do," Ryan said gently. "That doesn't make you wrong. It makes her selfish." I shook my head. It makes me naive." We stood there a few moments longer, listening to the thud of a basketball on pavement, the occasional laugh. Then Ryan stepped closer. "I think we should go away for a while." I turned to him, brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I mean, take the week. Take the time she doesn't think you're worth. Let's spend it somewhere that reminds you how wrong she is." I didn't answer right away. I didn't know how to. It had been years since I'd allowed myself the luxury of escape. Every vacation I'd planned had been rescheduled or canceled for someone else. Dad's health. Emily's panic attacks. Mom's last-minute surgeries. And in 2018, when Ryan and I were set to get married in Mendocino, I postponed the wedding entirely because Emily had a breakdown over her ex showing up with a new girlfriend to a mutual friend's bridal shower. She sobbed in my arms for 2 hours. Said she couldn't bear attending another wedding. So I canceled mine. It wasn't until this moment in that quiet kitchen that I realized I never rescheduled it. We just let it go. Like so many other things I had shelved for her. "Where would we go?" I asked softly. Ryan smiled, but it was the kind of smile that came from remembering. "Bora, Bora. You said once it was the only place where your brain might finally shut up." I laughed. It came out a little broken but real. That was a joke. Not to me. I leaned against him, let myself breathe into the warmth of his chest. For the first time that evening I felt something close to weightlessness. "Okay," I said. Let's do it. We booked the flights that night. First class, even though I flinched at the price, Ryan insisted. Said if I was going to be disinvited from a wedding I paid for, I might as well fly towards something beautiful. I didn't post anything on social media for the next 2 days. I didn't answer calls. I didn't check the group chat where our cousins were pretending nothing had happened. But I did hear from Jenna. Matey, she wrote, I heard what Emily did. It's messed up. Also, Mom's friend Pam didn't get invited either. Neither did Aunt Robin. I blinked. I thought I was the only one. Turns out Emily was on a mission. Curating her guest list like an influencer curates a brand. Not aesthetic enough, Jenna continued. That's what she told Pam, said her hair color clashed with the bridesmaid's palette. Ryan saw the message and let out a dry laugh. She's not building a guest list, she's building a photo shoot. I knew he was right. And that realization somehow made the whole thing easier. This wasn't about me. It wasn't even about family. It was about optics. Emily didn't want love. She wanted symmetry. A color-coded crowd, a stage. She had the dress, the venue, the groom. And now the stage was set. Without me. Ryan wrapped his arms around my shoulders and whispered, "Then let's not give her an audience. Let's leave the theater." I closed my eyes. We leave tomorrow. I spent the next morning finalizing the details. The flight left from LAX the following evening, connecting through Tahiti, then landing in Bora Bora just after sunrise. I booked the bungalow on the water, the kind with a glass floor and private steps into the ocean. Ryan upgraded the seats without telling me. First class. Champagne service. Flat beds. I found out when the confirmation email hit my inbox, and all I could do was blink and whisper wow. I emailed my manager at the ad agency and used the PTO I had been hoarding for 3 years. I didn't give an explanation. I just said I needed the time. She replied within minutes, told me to take care of myself and that everything would be fine when I got back. No one else in my family checked in. Not my mom, not my dad. Not even Jenna, though I suspected she didn't know yet. Emily had always been selective with her version of the truth. I imagined she told people I had a work conflict or couldn't fly. Or worse, that I was being dramatic and didn't want to come. The house felt strangely still that afternoon. Ryan packed in the other room while I stood in the kitchen staring at the fridge. There was a sticky note still stuck there from months ago. Emily had written it after borrowing my blender. "Thanks again, lifesaver." I peeled it off and dropped it into the trash. My phone buzzed. It was a message from my mother. Just one line. "Sisters don't always get along. But I hope you understand, it's your sister's day." I read it once. Then again. Then I called her. She answered like nothing had happened. "Hi, sweetheart. I didn't bother easing in. You really believe I shouldn't be there?" She exhaled slowly like this conversation was already exhausting. "Madeline, this is not about you. It's about Emily. She's worked so hard for this moment. We just want everything to go smoothly." I was quiet. Mom continued. "You and Ryan can have your own wedding later. You don't want to overshadow her. This is her time." There it was. The real reason. I wasn't omitted for logistics. I was removed for balance. I was a threat to the spotlight. I said nothing. My mother filled the silence. "Don't take it personally. Sometimes we have to support others by stepping back." I hung up without a word. Ryan walked in a few minutes later and saw my face. "Let me guess," he said. I nodded. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he picked up his phone and held it up. "I booked the car to LAX. Want to go early, grab dinner in Venice first?" I smiled, soft but tired. "I'd like that." That night I packed quietly. I folded dresses I hadn't worn in years, swimsuits still with tags on them. A sun hat I'd bought 5 years ago and never used. I folded my life into a suitcase and felt for once like it was mine again. The next morning the sun rose warm and golden. Seattle looked gentler than usual, like it was giving me a soft exit. I made coffee, opened the back door, and stood barefoot on the deck. My phone buzzed again. Instagram. Emily had posted a photo of her wedding invitation suite. Calligraphy on handmade paper, blush tones and gold accents, her name and Brent's in the center of a crest. The caption read, "2 days away, I can't wait to marry the love of my life in front of everyone who matters." I stared at that last line. Everyone who matters. I closed the app. Later at the airport, Ryan handed me a boarding pass and grinned. I didn't even look at it. I just followed him through security past the lines into the lounge where the coffee was strong and no one said my name. We boarded early. I tucked my bag into the overhead bin and settled into the seat, leather soft and cool. Ryan poured me a glass of sparkling water and kissed my hand. "You sure you want to post something?" I hesitated. Then I nodded. I opened my camera, snapped a photo of our passports resting on my lap, the boarding pass peeking out from underneath. The background showed the first-class cabin glowing under warm light. I opened Instagram, typed the caption slowly. "Not everyone gets invited, but everyone gets to be free." I hit post. Within minutes, the likes rolled in. Jenna commented with 3 exclamation marks. An old coworker messaged me, "You look amazing. Where are you going?" I didn't respond. I leaned back, sipped my drink, and watched the plane taxi toward the runway. Above me, the seatbelt sign blinked on. Below me, the weight of years lifted. And beside me, someone who had always stayed. The moment we stepped off the boat onto the wooden dock, I felt it. That quiet, wide peace. The kind that didn't need music or explanation. The water around us was impossibly clear, almost like the ocean hadn't been told it was supposed to be blue. The sky was soft, not loud, with sun just gentle and endless. Ryan took my hand and smiled. Our bungalow stood at the farthest edge of the row, perched right above the turquoise shallows with nothing behind it but open sea. Inside, the room smelled like cedar and salt. The bed was huge, draped with gauzy white curtains that swayed with the breeze. The floor had a glass panel at the center, and when I looked down I could see fish weaving beneath our feet like threads in water. We didn't unpack right away. We took our shoes off, left the bags by the door, and walked straight onto the back deck. I dipped my toes into the water. It was warm. The kind of warm that makes you exhale without meaning to. That first night we fell asleep to the sound of the tide brushing up against the wood. No traffic, no textings, no voices saying they were disappointed. I woke up the next morning without clenching my jaw. Ryan was already up. He sat outside with a book in his lap, hair still messy from sleep, a mug of coffee resting beside him. He looked at me when I stepped out and just said, "There she is." We spent the day doing nothing, which for once didn't feel like failure. We snorkeled, ate fresh fruit from a floating tray delivered by canoe, laughed over scrambled eggs that came shaped like flowers. I took pictures I didn't post. I let the sun warm the skin below my collarbones, the part that hadn't seen light in months. By the 3rd day, I forgot to check my phone. I stopped waiting for a call that wouldn't come. I stopped rehearsing conversations in my head that no one would ever start. I started sleeping through the night. One morning, I woke before Ryan. The light outside was soft, glowing like the inside of a pearl. I made myself tea and curled up on the lounge chair. It had rained a little before dawn, and the air smelled like citrus and earth. I picked up my phone just to play music. But the screen opened to Instagram. Without thinking, I tapped the app. The first thing I saw was Emily. She stood in front of an arched trellis of roses, wearing a fitted white gown that sparkled like quartz under the fairy lights. Her blonde hair was curled and pinned beneath a crown of orchids. Her arms looped through Brent Callahan's, who wore a tux too crisp to be real. His smile was camera-trained, that kind of effortless charm I'd seen 100 times in Tech Digest. The caption read, "Mrs. Callahan at last." It had 1,000 likes already. The photographer tagged 5 vendors. The wedding planner tagged the venue. Someone from Brent's company commented, "Best day ever." I scrolled. Another post. A video this time. Emily walked slowly down the aisle, smiling like she'd trained for it. Mom and Dad sat in the front row, both dressed in pale blue. My mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue. My father reached over and squeezed her hand. I wasn't in any frame. Not in the bridal prep photos. Not in the family toast. Not in the bouquet send-off. It was like I had never existed. And strangely, that didn't crush me. I didn't cry. I didn't feel rage clawing up my throat. I watched until the video ended, then set the phone down beside my tea. Ryan stirred behind me. "That the wedding?" I nodded. He rubbed his eyes. "How do you feel?" I waited a moment before answering. "Free." I meant it. There was something oddly clean about being erased so completely. Like a chalkboard finally wiped down, not just smeared. I wasn't angry anymore. Not right then. Just done. If they could be that happy without me, I could be just as happy without them. We spent the rest of the morning in the water. I floated on my back staring at the clouds. Ryan swam over and splashed me just enough to make me squeal. We kissed without thinking. We planned nothing. We let the wind tell us when to move. That afternoon we ate grilled mahi-mahi on the beach, our toes buried in the warm sand. A local musician played something slow and soft near the bar, and the breeze carried the sound across the shoreline. No one called. No one texted. No one checked if I had fallen off the face of the earth. And still I breathed easier than I had in years. As the sun set, the sky went lavender, then coral, then a deep velvet blue. Ryan leaned back on his elbows beside me. "You want dessert only if it floats on a tray." He laughed. "Coming right up." He jogged toward the bungalow, and I stayed there on the sand, toes in the tide, staring at the stars beginning to press through the sky. Somewhere halfway across the world, my sister was dancing in her designer heels, showing off a ring the size of a gumdrop, and I was finally still. That night Ryan came back with a small plate balanced in one hand and a folded napkin in the other. On the plate was a single scoop of coconut sorbet and a ring sitting right in the middle of it. It was not a diamond. It wasn't big. It wasn't even new. The band was simple rose gold and slightly worn at the edges, like it had lived a little. I stared at it, then at him. He dropped to one knee right there in the sand, his curls still damp and sticking to his forehead, his flip-flops barely hanging on. No speeches this time, no guest list, no parents involved. Just him. He said my name like it was a promise. "Madeline. If you'll have me, just you and me, no aisle, no audience. Just us. Say yes." My mouth opened, but no sound came out. My heart had this full ache to it, like someone was pressing warm hands against it from both sides. I'd never felt so chosen. I nodded. The tears came faster than I expected. I said yes. He stood, slid the ring on my finger, then pulled me in close. We stayed like that, quiet, soft, like the ocean wanted to listen. Later that evening, I took a picture of us together. My hair was still damp, his nose slightly sunburned, the ring barely visible between our hands. I posted it without overthinking. The caption read, "I wasn't on the guest list, but I was chosen for the journey." I didn't tag anyone. Didn't use any hashtags, just let it drift. We spent the next few hours playing cards in bed and sharing a bottle of sparkling guava soda someone had left in the mini fridge. At some point, Ryan fell asleep mid-hand, a 7 of hearts stuck to his chest. I smiled, took a mental photo, then picked up my phone to set an alarm for the next morning. That's when I saw the notification. Jenna. My cousin. Emily's bridesmaid. The only one who hadn't unfollowed me. Her message was short. "Matey. Something really weird is going on. Brent vanished after the reception. No one can find a single photo of him after the cake." I blinked. I stared at the screen, assuming I had read it wrong. Was this a prank? Some bad attempt to pull me back in? I didn't reply. 3 minutes later, another message buzzed through, and the police just showed up. My stomach dropped. I sat up slowly, the mattress dipping beneath me as I moved. The screen glowed in the dark. I reread the messages 3 more times. Vanished. No photos. Police. I glanced at Ryan, still asleep, the card now crumpled beneath his cheek. I slipped out of bed, stepped onto the deck, and let the sea air hit my face. There was no breeze. No noise, no music from the other bungalows. Just a perfect silence that suddenly felt too still. I opened Instagram again, went back to the wedding posts. They had slowed, nothing new had been added in the last few hours. Emily's last post was her and Brent on the dance floor. Her head tilted back in laughter, his hand on her waist. I zoomed in on his face. It looked too perfect. I checked the timestamp. It was posted at 9:02 p.m. Then nothing. Not a single picture after that. No sparkler exit, no getaway car, no group shots of friends barefoot on the dance floor. Just nothing. Which was unusual. Emily documented everything. She was the kind of person who posted her oat milk foam art. I switched to Facebook. Same thing. One album full of prep shots, ceremony, cake cutting, dancing. All of it before 10 o'clock. Nothing after. I checked the tags. Other guests had posted stories during the reception. But they all stopped around the same window. A sudden social blackout. And then a gap. The kind that felt deliberate. I texted Jenna back. Are you serious? The typing bubble appeared almost instantly. Yes. He went to grab something from the groom's suite around 1:00 and never came back. They tried calling him. No answer. Then someone realized he wasn't in any of the post-reception photos. Security checked the cameras. His car is still in the lot. But he's gone. No one saw him leave. Another message followed. And now Emily's in the lobby with 2 detectives. I read it twice before locking the phone and pressing it against my chest. The waves kept lapping the shore like nothing had changed, but something had, and it was only just beginning. My phone buzzed again before sunrise. It was Jenna. She was calling over FaceTime, her face tilted up under the flickering dome light of a car. Her hair was still curled from the wedding, but her eyes were puffy and red like she hadn't blinked in hours. Matey. They just arrested Emily. Right after the last photos were taken. I thought it was a prank or some TikTok thing, but it's real. I recorded part of it. I'm sending it now. I sat up straighter, heart-thudding, fingers slightly trembling as I waited for the video to come through. The clip loaded slowly. When it finally opened, I saw the tail end of the reception. Emily stood near the floral arch, bouquet in hand, striking a pose while a photographer adjusted the lens. Her gown was flaring out like a cloud around her feet. Guests were clapping softly in the background, some lifting their phones for one last candid. Then a voice cut through. Is there an Emily Shaw here? The tone was sharp, official. Not the joking kind. 2 uniformed officers stepped into the frame from the right. One of them held a folded sheet of paper. The other had a badge clipped to his collar. You could hear the murmurs ripple through the crowd. Emily froze. Her head tilted slightly, still holding the pose like she assumed it was part of the shoot. The smile on her face didn't falter. Not right away. That's me, she said, laughing a little. The officer nodded. Then he unfolded the paper and began to read. We have a warrant for your arrest for identity fraud and unlawful use of financial information. You're under investigation for opening accounts under a false name and unauthorized borrowing. Emily blinked. She looked past the officers, scanning the crowd, searching for someone, maybe Brent. Her voice, when it came, cracked. Wait. What? The second officer moved behind her, gently but firmly taking her wrists. You could hear gasps. The camera jostled slightly as Jenna tried to keep the shot steady. The bouquet fell. Someone in the background shouted her name, but no one moved to stop it. Then the clip ended. I lowered the phone, my mind spinning. Identity fraud. I opened the group chats from our extended family. Messages were exploding in every thread. Someone had already uploaded a different video from another angle. And there were photos now. Emily being walked out in full bridal attire, veil still pinned, handcuffed in front of the same fountain where she and Brent had kissed an hour before. The image was surreal. I didn't know what to feel. Shock, validation, pity. Then my phone lit up with one more message from Jenna. It was Brent. He reported her. That stopped everything. I stared at the screen. The last anyone had seen of him was when he'd stepped away to grab something. But that had been deliberate. He hadn't disappeared, he had gone to the police. I texted her back. Why? Her answer came quickly. He found out she used an old account tied to one of her exes. She still had access to some login from when they were dating. She opened a supplemental credit line under his name. It paid for half the wedding. Apparently the ex got a fraud alert, traced it, then called Brent. Brent confronted her. She denied everything. So he waited and turned her in. At the wedding, I didn't respond. My thoughts ran wild. I remembered the registry that looked far too expensive. The imported florals, the 6-tier cake, the custom aisle runner with their initials stitched in gold. Everything had felt excessive, overcompensating. Like she was desperate to prove something. Or maybe to cover something up. I thought back to the way she used to twist the truth even as a teenager. How she could make anyone believe anything if she smiled just right. Our parents always thought she was charming. They didn't see how much she borrowed, how often she bent facts until they cracked. And now she'd walked herself down a glittering aisle only to walk out in cuffs. Ryan stirred beside me. Everything okay? I looked over at him, nodded slowly. Number. But it makes sense now. I handed him the phone, let him read the messages. He didn't say anything for a long time, just sat there thinking. When he finally looked up, he said what I hadn't yet dared to. So, Brent's not missing. I shook my head. He was just done. The sun was rising, washing everything outside in gold. The kind of light that usually promises something new. But all I felt was a strange, quiet ache. I had known Emily my whole life. I had also never known her at all. And somewhere between the bouquet toss and the police report, she had finally revealed herself. Not with a scream. Not even with a meltdown. Just with silence and a pair of handcuffs wrapped around the lace sleeves of her perfect dress. We didn't speak for a while after that. There wasn't much left to say. My phone started ringing less than an hour after sunrise. It was Mom. She didn't even wait for me to say hello. Her voice crashed through like a storm. Madeline, thank God you're up. Emily's falling apart. She hasn't stopped crying. Brent won't answer. None of his family will talk to us. This is out of control. I sat on the edge of the couch watching the steam curl from my mug of tea. She kept going. You need to talk to her. She'll listen to you. You've always been the calm one. You always know what to say. Please. She needs her sister right now. I closed my eyes. The way she said it almost made it sound like Emily was the victim. I let her talk until the silence between us was louder than her pleas. Then I said quietly, but clearly I didn't cause this. And you know it. There was a pause. Madeline, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you've always had a way with her. She trusts you. She looks up to you. I almost laughed. She stole my registry, used my name in her speeches, erased me from her wedding, and spent months lying to everyone, including herself. And now that her little house of cards collapsed in public, suddenly I was the one with the key to fix it. I didn't answer. Mom filled the silence with more desperation. You're the older sister. That means something. You've always been the one to hold this family together. I know things haven't been fair lately, but Emily's your sister. If you don't help her now, she trailed off. And I realized what she was really saying. If I didn't step in, I'd be blamed again. For the fallout. For the pain. For not catching the lie sooner. For not dragging my sister out of her mess like I always had. I took a deep breath. Mom, I think Emily's going to have to figure this one out without me. Another pause. This time longer. Her voice came back smaller. Shaky. You don't mean that. I do. I really do. I ended the call before she could find a new angle to twist. I leaned back, letting the quiet settle into the room like fog. For once, I didn't feel guilty. Just tired. Bone-deep tired from a lifetime of being everyone's emotional cleanup crew. Ryan walked in with his hair still damp from the shower. He looked at me, eyebrows raised. That your mom? I nodded. He didn't ask what she said. He knew. Instead, he handed me a bagel and sat next to me in silence like an anchor. Around noon, Jenna texted. She had stayed behind in Charleston to help pack up Grandma's things. The wedding was over. Most of the guests had either gone home or avoided the house entirely. But Grandma had opinions. Jenna sent a voice note first. Just 30 seconds. Grandma told Mom at breakfast, you reap what you sow. Then she looked her dead in the eye and said maybe if Madeline hadn't been shoved away from the table, Emily wouldn't have ended up shoved out of her own life. I played it 3 times. Then I called Jenna. She answered immediately. Hey, you okay? That was the question everyone kept asking, but she meant it differently. I'm fine, I said. Or as fine as I can be after watching my sister get arrested in a designer gown. Jenna sighed. She's still in custody. They're not sure if she'll get out before the weekend. Dad's trying to call in favors. But no one's picking up. I think he's finally realizing his reputation's tied to hers. Good. Matey. I'm not saying I'm happy she's in trouble, but I'm not going to pretend she didn't build this for herself. For once someone else is cleaning up the mess. Not me. Jenna was quiet. Then she said softly, Grandma's been staring at your old chair all morning. The one at the table they didn't save for you. She keeps touching the back of it like it might say something. I swallowed. That chair. I hadn't even noticed it at the wedding. I'd been too busy disappearing. Let her keep it. Maybe it'll remind them. Jenna exhaled. I think she's the only one who really saw what they did to you. She said Mom kept protecting Emily like it was sport. And now, well, sport ended. I looked out the window. The sun was fading behind a line of gray clouds. Let me know if you need help with Grandma's stuff. I'll drive down this weekend. You sure? Yeah. I think I need to say goodbye properly. To what? To all of it. We hung up, and for the first time in days the silence felt clean. Not empty. Just cleared out. Later that evening Ryan and I went for a walk through the neighborhood. Leaves had started falling in earnest. The sidewalks were lined with gold and red like confetti after a parade that had long ended. When we got back home there was one new voicemail from Dad. I didn't listen. I deleted it without opening. I didn't need to hear what he had to say. Because whatever it was I knew how it would end. He'd say it wasn't their fault. And I'd finally stopped believing that. Of all the things I thought I'd feel, what surprised me most was the calm. There was no rage, no need to scream, no storm pounding in my chest. Just stillness. I didn't want explanations. I didn't crave apologies. I didn't even want closure. What I wanted was distance. Silence. Space to finally ask myself who was I when I wasn't holding my family together. I walked to the kitchen, made myself tea, and sat at the table with a pen and a stack of blank paper. Not the laptop, not the notes app. I needed the scratch of ink, the permanence of handwriting. I needed to slow my thoughts down enough to feel every word. I started listing everything I had ever done for Emily. I wrote about the time she got into a car accident in high school, and I took the blame because she was terrified Mom would ground her before homecoming. I remembered all the weekends I gave up in college, helping her with campaign posters and speeches while she went to galas and interviews with people who couldn't even remember my name. I wrote about how I drove 2 hours to help her move apartments, only to have her post a thank you photo with someone else captioned "My Rock." How I lent her money 3 separate times to cover rent, only to later see her on Instagram, flaunting designer handbags and spa weekends. I kept going. I remembered when she crashed at my apartment for 2 months after her ex dumped her, crying every night and swearing I was the only one who understood her. I cooked her meals, canceled dates with Ryan, watched her dog while she found herself. When she left, she didn't even say thank you, just forgot her keys and never came back for them. I wrote all of it down. Every memory that used to sting now just made me tired. Then I flipped the page and began a new list. This time it was everything Emily had done when I needed her. The page stayed mostly blank. She missed my job promotion dinner because she had a hair appointment. She RSVP'd maybe to my birthday 3 years in a row, but always made it to influencers' events without fail. She once told me Ryan looked like a nice guy if you're into boring stability, and laughed, as if I should thank her for the honesty. She didn't show up when I had surgery, said she'd been emotionally drained. She didn't call when Grandma died. Said she was between flights. I stared at the lopsided column. 2 lists. One heavy, the other hollow. Ryan came home early that day. I was still sitting at the table, the pen dangling between my fingers. He looked at the papers, read my expression, and didn't ask what I'd written. He didn't have to. Instead, he walked behind me and gently rested his hands on my shoulders. "You don't need to send anything," he said softly. "They already know. They've always known." I stared at the window. A bird had landed on the railing, ruffling its feathers like it had all the time in the world. "It's like they just expect me to absorb it all," I murmured. "Every mess. Every mistake. Like I'm built to handle it, but I'm not." Ryan knelt beside me, his voice even. "That's because they've never asked who you are outside of fixing things for them. They only know the version of you that gives. They've never cared to meet the version that says no." He brushed his thumb across my hand. "You don't owe them another second of your life." That night I took his advice. I didn't write another letter. I didn't return any calls. I didn't open the dozens of unread messages that had filled my inbox. I went to my contacts and blocked Mom. Then Emily. Then reluctantly Jenna. I paused before blocking Jenna. Part of me didn't want to. She had always been the quiet one, the one who followed rather than led. But I also knew she'd be the messenger. She'd try to convince me to forgive again, just like she always had. And I couldn't let myself be reeled back into that cycle. Not this time. Instead, I sent her one last message. "Don't worry about me. They think I'm the cleanup crew, but I'm not sweeping up this time." Then I turned off the phone. The next day I did something radical. Nothing. No calls, no texts, no checking the news to see how Emily's arrest was being spun. I didn't need to know whether they blamed Brent or the weather or the mental strain of being in the public eye. I didn't care what headlines Jenna was reposting or what Mom was whispering behind closed doors. I took a walk through our neighborhood, bought peaches at the farmer's market, read half a novel on the porch. I even napped in the afternoon, something I hadn't done since grad school. Ryan found me curled up with the book beside me. "I didn't know you could nap," he teased. I smiled into the cushion. I didn't know either. Later that evening, I roasted vegetables while Ryan set the table, and for the first time in a long while we talked about us. Not them, not the family, just us. Where we might go this fall. Whether we'd take that trip to Vermont like we kept postponing. What color to paint the guest room now that it wasn't needed for family drop-ins. As we ate, a light rain started tapping the windows. The world felt quieter. Not because everything was fixed, but because I had finally stopped trying to fix things that didn't want to be healed, and for once that felt like enough. I ordered hibiscus tea with mint and a slice of honeycomb. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the curve of the horizon, melting into the sea like butter on a warm skillet. A soft breeze drifted through the linen curtains of the resort cafe, fluttering them against the wicker chairs. I sat barefoot, cross-legged, a straw hat shielding my eyes, while the waiter brought over a glass pitcher beating with condensation. I hadn't spoken to anyone from Oregon in days. No voicemails, no missed calls. I had blocked them all except for Jenna, who respected silence the way people in Bali respect tide patterns. She only messaged me once or twice a day, brief, quiet updates like postcards from a country at war. That morning she'd sent me a clip without a word. I tapped it open, not knowing what to expect, and saw Emily's face. Her bridal makeup was still perfect, eyeliner, sharp lips red. The crowd parted around her like a biblical scene, cameras raised, murmurs erupting. She blinked in confusion as two officers stepped forward. "Are you Emily Shaw?" "Yes." What is this?" "We have a warrant for your arrest for financial fraud, identity theft, and misuse of federal loan systems. Please place your hands where we can see them." Someone gasped. A man dropped his champagne flute. I recognized him as one of the groomsmen. In the background, her wedding planner looked frozen in time. Then the officers cuffed her. She flinched. The photographer kept shooting out of instinct or disbelief. As they led her past the floral arch and down the gravel path, her white dress dragged behind her like a wounded animal. The video ended just before she passed her mother, but the still image had already gone viral. By afternoon, TikTok was ablaze with edits and commentary. One video had overlay text, "When the bride gets arrested before the cake is cut." Another had slowed the moment she was handcuffed, synced to a breakup song with a violin drop. The hashtag was everywhere. Wedding fraud Emily. I watched it all from my lounge chair. I didn't feel joy. Not really. It wasn't that kind of justice. It was quieter. Like watching a train that ignored its own warning signs derail in slow motion. You weren't happy it crashed. You were just exhausted from screaming about the tracks. Later that evening, Jenna sent a picture. It was grainy, taken from across the street. My mother stood outside our family home clutching a grocery bag while two local news crews hovered near the sidewalk. A female reporter with blonde hair shouted questions. "Mrs. Whitaker, did you know your daughter falsified loan applications? Was the wedding funded through stolen credit lines? Do you plan to make a public statement?" I zoomed in on my mother's face. She didn't look angry. She didn't look scared. She looked confused. As if none of this was supposed to touch her porch. I set the phone down, reached for my tea, and turned my chair toward the sea. Across the terrace, a couple argued softly over dinner, something about a delayed flight. A group of Australians played cards. Someone's child giggled in the pool. It was all so normal. So mercifully distant. Ryan joined me around sunset. He didn't ask for permission. Just pulled up a chair, placed a glass of pineapple soda beside mine, and sat in silence for a while. I glanced at him, half smiling. "You didn't have to come." He shrugged. "You didn't have to bring me here either." I exhaled. The light turned golden. "Emily's Instagram went private this morning," I said. "That means she's losing control of the narrative." I nodded. "Or maybe she just doesn't want to see what people are saying." He looked over at me. "Do you?" I shook my head. "I don't need to." He didn't press. He never did. We sat like that for a long time, listening to the waves lap against the stone edge of the resort. There was no rush. No deadline. The air smelled like sea salt and lime. Eventually, I opened my phone again. I hadn't planned to, but I checked the comments under the viral video anyway. People were vicious, sure, but some were observant. They had noticed the label on one of the financial documents. They had started digging. One user posted a blurry photo of Emily and me from college and wrote, "Wait, isn't this her sister? Anyone else feel like she got erased from the wedding?" I smiled faintly and closed the app. Let the internet do what it does. I wasn't part of that story anymore. Not as a cleanup crew. Not as the quiet sibling in the corner. The kitchen staff lit torches around the patio. Music floated from the bar. Soft jazz, something about September and remembering. I leaned back in my chair and traced the rim of my glass with a finger. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't retribution or payback or a master plan. It was the absence of all of that. It was what remained when I stopped offering explanations, stopped writing rescue manuals for people who refused to read them. It was peace. And as the stars blinked to life over the Indian Ocean, I realized something even deeper. I didn't need the last word. Silence was speaking for me now. Loud and clear. The email came on a Wednesday morning while I was stirring honey into my tea. It was from a producer at a podcast called Her Side of the Story, inviting me to speak about the experience of being cut out, of choosing myself, of not going back. At first I laughed. Me. On a podcast, I wasn't an activist or an author or anyone with a platform. I was just a woman who got tired of begging for a chair at her own family's table. But the more I thought about it, the more the idea settled into me like sunlight through linen curtains. This wasn't about Emily anymore. This wasn't about revenge or embarrassment or even setting the record straight. It was about naming what had happened. About offering that name to anyone else who had swallowed their pain in silence for far too long. I showed the email to Ryan. He read it quietly and then looked at me with those calm, steady eyes. "You don't owe them your silence," he said. "You owe yourself your peace." So I said yes. We recorded the interview remotely from the bungalow. I sat cross-legged on the couch, microphone clipped to my shirt, heart knocking a little too loud in my chest. The host, Talia, had a warm voice and sharper instincts. She didn't ask about drama or headlines. She asked about me. About what it meant to love a family that only loved you in conditionals. About being useful versus being seen. For the first time, I told the full story. Not in fragments or apologetic tones. I told her about the wedding I wasn't welcome at. About the years of being the helper, the fixer, the one who kept the chaos contained. I talked about the time Emily cried her way out of a DUI charge, and I used my savings to hire her a lawyer. I told her how I'd been told to be patient, to forgive, to understand, even when no one ever did the same for me. I thought I might cry, but I didn't. My voice didn't shake. What surprised me most was how calm I felt. Like I was finally laying bricks for a home I could live in. After we ended the recording, I sat still for a long while. Outside waves pressed softly against the shore. Ryan came and saw the look on my face and didn't say anything. He just sat beside me and laced his fingers through mine. A week later, the episode aired. I didn't expect much, maybe a few quiet messages. Maybe one person saying thank you. Instead, my inbox lit up. Comments, emails, voice notes. Some from strangers, some from people I hadn't heard from in years. The subject lines alone made my heart stutter. Your story is mine too. I left my family last year and thought I was the only one. You reminded me I deserve better. One woman wrote, I was always the responsible sister too. I didn't go to therapy, I went to work. Your story cracked something open for me. There were critics, of course. There always are. A few accused me of airing family business. One message said blood is blood. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My story wasn't meant for those who wanted to keep things quiet. It was for the ones trying to find their voice again. A few days after the episode went live, I received a message from a literature professor at a small college in Vermont. She asked if she could share my story with her class as part of a unit on personal narratives and boundary setting. She said you walked away from a table that never served you and found a whole ocean instead. That one stayed with me. I saved the message and read it again that night while Ryan and I sat watching the stars drift over the sea. He looked at me and said, "They're listening." Finally. I nodded. But I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt like someone who had carried a heavy backpack up a mountain not to plant a flag but just to breathe again. Jenna messaged me too. Just a few lines. I listened. You were right to leave. I wish I had gone with you. I told her thank you. Nothing more. I wasn't ready for anything beyond that. She had her own road to walk. Then came the biggest surprise. A handwritten letter forwarded from the podcast team. It was from a woman in Florida who had lost her sister to suicide. She wrote about years of estrangement, of guilt, of silence that came too late. Your voice gave me a little peace, she said. I can't go back, but I can be better with the people I still have. I cried reading that one. For all the mess, for all the wounds that hadn't yet closed, I finally understood why telling the truth mattered. Not because it changed the past, but because it opened something in the future. Ryan wrapped his arms around me that night as I cried. Not a sobbing cry, just the slow, grateful tears of someone no longer holding it in. You told your story, he said. You don't owe them anything else. He was right. For the first time, I wasn't carrying it all alone. The world was wider than I'd believed. And maybe my voice, small and trembled as it once was, had joined a chorus that could move something forward. I wasn't anyone's fixer anymore. I wasn't the secret keeper. I was just Madeline. Whole, seen, and still becoming. We moved into the cottage at the end of October, just as the winds off the Pacific began to carry that faint salt-sweet sharpness that only existed near Carmel by the sea. The house was small, whitewashed, with blue shutters and an old fig tree in the back that split the fence with its roots. It wasn't fancy, but it was quiet. It was ours. Each morning, I walked barefoot across the wood floors, made coffee, and opened the windows. Sometimes I painted, sometimes I just sat. I didn't check the news anymore. I didn't scroll through trending hashtags or read the endless threads of speculation. I let the noise go. Like pulling off a heavy coat you forgot you were wearing. Jenna texted now and then. Nothing dramatic. Just small updates in the tone of someone who knew how to offer information without burden. Emily was apparently hiring legal counsel. She wanted to claim that I had exploited the family for fame. Brent had cut ties, moved back to Chicago, and deleted all his social media. Mom was still attending luncheons and pretending it was all a misunderstanding fueled by internet hysteria. According to Jenna, she told one neighbor, the media twisted everything. None of this is real. But it was real. Every bit of it. Not just the parts that made headlines, but the years before that. The dinners where I was invisible. The whispered blame. The assumption that I could absorb all of it and still keep smiling. I didn't answer Jenna's texts. I read them sometimes twice, then turned off my phone and went to sit by the sea. One afternoon a letter came. Not a text, not an email. A real envelope with my full name handwritten in my mother's cursive. It was long. 4 pages. She began with how much she loved me. That she always had. That she didn't know how to show it. That she came from a different generation. That grief had made her rigid. That she thought keeping the family together meant making hard choices and that she didn't always know how to include me in them. She wrote about the wedding. She said she regretted not making it more balanced but that things got swept up so quickly. She said she wished I had talked to her more. That maybe if I'd just said something clearly they would have understood better. Then in the last paragraph she asked if I could consider forgiving her. That she missed me. That things were never perfect but we were still mother and daughter. That nothing was more important than that. I stared at the letter for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't feel anger. I felt something quieter. Like holding a stone you've carried for years and realizing you don't need to understand it to let it go. Ryan read it that night after dinner. He didn't say much at first, just folded it, placed it gently back in the envelope, and slid it into the drawer beside our bed. Then he turned to me and said, "You know you don't have to forgive her, right?" I nodded. I did know. It wasn't hate. It wasn't bitterness. It was just a truth I'd finally stopped trying to rewrite. I could love who she once was or who I wished she'd been. But I didn't owe her access to my peace. I didn't write back. For the first time in years, I wasn't twisting myself into someone softer just to be tolerated. I wasn't waiting for a moment of approval, a pat on the head, a seat at a table that had long since been set without me. I painted the kitchen walls a pale lemon color. Ryan built a bench for the fig tree, and we'd sit there most evenings with tea watching the sun dip into the ocean like it was folding itself to sleep. I stopped answering unknown numbers. I stopped rehearsing what I'd say if they ever called. I didn't check my old hometown's news feeds. I didn't reread the court filings. Sometimes in the early morning when the fog was still low over the hills, I would think of Emily. Not in anger. Just in memory. Like remembering a street used to take every day that's now blocked off. She would always be a part of me. That couldn't be helped. But she didn't get to define me anymore. One morning, Ryan found a beach trail that led to a cove with tide pools and wildflowers. We packed sandwiches and walked the whole way. There, sitting on the rocks with sea spray in my hair, I realized something that stopped me cold. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of being alone, not of being misunderstood, not of being the one who walked away. I didn't need to be chosen to be whole, and I didn't need to explain myself to those who'd never tried to understand me in the first place. That evening, I lit a candle on the windowsill. Just one. No meaning, no ritual. Just light. Just stillness. Just a life beginning again. Quietly. On my own terms. The wind carried the scent of salt and gardenia through the open window that night, and I let it in. I left my phone face down on the counter untouched. The emails, the pings, the people trying to rewrite the past in their favor could wait. I wasn't theirs to reach anymore. In the days that followed, I felt myself loosening, like stitches being carefully undone. The tension in my shoulders that had been a permanent resident for years finally began to dissolve. I took long walks. I painted seashells I found along the shore. Ryan learned to make fresh pasta. We laughed about small things. Like how I still forgot which cabinet held the plates. Or how he always hummed the same 3 notes while brushing his teeth. One afternoon, after coming in from the garden with dirt on my hands and sun on my back, I sat at the little desk by the window and opened my laptop. The cursor blinked on a blank screen for a few seconds before I typed anything. And then slowly I wrote a caption. Not a statement, not an attack. Just truth. It was an old photo I had never posted. Taken in Bora Bora back when everything had just fallen apart and I had escaped the wreckage. In the picture, I was sitting at the edge of a dock, hair damp, no makeup, looking out over the water. There was a piece in that photo I hadn't understood at the time. I typed, "That wedding didn't have me in it because I'm no longer a supporting character in someone else's story. Thank you, Bora Bora, for giving me the freedom I didn't know I needed." I hit post and shut the laptop. There were no hashtags. No clever spin. Just closure. A few hours later, Ryan found me sitting on the porch sipping tea. The sun was low, casting golden ribbons across the fields beyond the cliffside. He didn't ask about the post. He didn't bring up Emily or my parents or the noise that had defined so much of our past. Instead, he sat beside me and held my hand. After a long silence, I whispered, "You know, if I was the one pushed away from the table, maybe that's because I was meant to find a better room." He smiled and said, "Or maybe you were always meant to build your own." That night we ate dinner by candlelight, not because it was romantic, but because it felt simple. Intentional. Every part of our new life had become that. Deliberate. Stripped of performance. Filled with quiet choices that built something stronger than any ceremony could. Jenna called the next week. She didn't ask to reconnect. She didn't apologize on behalf of anyone. She just said she hoped I was okay and that she missed me. I told her I was okay. And that I hoped she was too. That was all. There would always be a before and after. But I was no longer trapped in the before. I didn't live in the echoes of who I used to be. And I didn't need to drag those who couldn't come with me. There are moments now where I still think about the wedding. Not with regret. But like someone remembering a dream they once had then grew out of. A version of myself I no longer recognized. The girl who had tried so hard to be good enough for people who never looked closely enough to see who she really was. That girl would have done anything to be invited. She would have twisted herself to fit their picture. But I'm not her anymore. This isn't a story about revenge. It's a reminder. If someone erases your name from their life, don't waste your time scratching at the door. Walk toward the places where your name is written in bold. Go where you're seen. And if you've ever been excluded from a table, a wedding, a family, a story that wasn't built for you, don't beg to be let back in. Build your own. If this story reached something in you, stay with this channel. There are more stories ahead. Stories for women who were told they were too much or not enough. Stories where walking away isn't failure but freedom. You belong here. Just as you are.